The telescope captured the object changing its trajectory in an unnatural manner, meaning it must be some sort of extraterrestrial light.
Something unlike anything we've ever seen was just observed moving through space by the James Webb Space Telescope. It is not a star, a planet, or a comet. It defies the laws of physics, drifts purposefully, and pulses in odd rhythms. It may not even be from our universe, according to scientists. Is it constructed by or something else? What Webb discovered might permanently alter our perception of the universe. And this is only the start. Something that shouldn't be there. It was routine at first. Astronomers frequently use a calibration field for testing, and the James Webb Space Telescope was scanning through a calm area of the sky. This specific area of the Sculptor Galaxy group is well known, quiet, and perfect for assessing the stability of instruments. However, something unexpected occurred during that check. Just one shape made a slight movement across the background. At first glance, it might have been a stray asteroid or just noise. However, that flicker became a headline when the data came back clear. It was no ordinary moving object. Nothing in the satellite or asteroid catalogs matched it. Something was slowly but steadily moving across the frame in Webb's infrared data. It wasn't orbital, but it wasn't random either. It didn't move like a rock or a comet. It wasn't random. It was deliberate and steady. In a second frame, the anomaly appeared once more. It was real. But you don't expect surprises in test fields in astrophysics, ESA's Dr. Lena Ward stated. That's why this was so concerning. Every system had been double-cheeked by the team. Was it a cosmic ray, a lens flare, or a software error? Signal, which was constant across several sensors and wavelengths, originated outside the instrument. It was not an error that they had discovered. It was a novel experience. And its behavior was even more perplexing. This object lacked a comet's tail, a star's glow, and a galaxy's structural light. It appeared to be a shifting void, a fragment of the sky itself shifting out of position. Most oddly, though, it wasn't just dark. A faint structured corona of twisted light surrounded it. As though space itself were responding, the vicinity of the object shifted and bent. However, there was no heat signature, no gravitational lensing that fit any known model, and no visible light emitted by the object itself. It exhibited no characteristics of a brown dwarf, black hole, or other stellar remnant. It didn't belong to anything we've ever cataloged, and it moved by itself. According to Dr. Nadia Singh, an astrophysicist at Caltech, not every new discovery fits the drawer you have set aside for it. Scientists can typically categorize objects that travel through space in a matter of minutes. However, this item disregarded the rules. It didn't follow gravity, but it drifted purposefully. Unlike a star, it absorbed light. Furthermore, it was unidentified in any archive. One thing became evident as researchers continued their investigation. This wasn't simply a mystery. It could not be explained at all. Not a galaxy, not a star. Examining an object's light is the first rule of space object identification. In one way or another, everything in the universe glows. Light is reflected or emitted in familiar patterns by stars, planets, and even asteroids. However, this item didn't. It did not glow. The light surrounding it was being consumed. An unsettling silhouette, resembling a hole cut out of the sky, was captured by Webb's infrared cameras. A shimmer around the edges. Nothing inside. It wasn't just gloomy. It was a void. Although black holes have a gravitational pull, astronomers hypothesized that it might be a compact object similar to one. Their pull on nearby stars or the hot material they absorb and emit as X-rays are two ways to observe them. Neither did this item. There was no heat from falling gas, no bending of nearby orbits, and no sign of mass in the vicinity. It just walked across the open area without making any noise. Dr. Pavlin, an MIT cosmologist, explained that what's so odd about it is the lack of typical behavior. Then they thought of a galaxy. Some galaxies are distorted or faint. However, every galaxy, no matter how strange, has motion. missions, star populations, and structure. That was not the case with this item. No central bulge, no spiral arms, and no steady radiation profile. It resembled a piece of machinery torn from its blueprint. It was amorphous but apparently ordered, geometric but shapeless. According to Webb's instruments, it was bigger than any asteroid or comet. However, it didn't act like something that had been formed by accretion or natural collapse. The light behind the object was also measured by Webb. At that point, an additional twist appeared. The background starlight was not bending as it should have. It was distorted by the object in broken, dispersed waves rather than in a circle like a lens. Spiraling lights that resembled a photon-based whirlpool. There is no known gravitational behavior consistent with that effect. The only explanation was that it was interacting with the geometry of the vacuum rather than just matter or energy. Instead of acting like an object, it acts more like a process. During the ESHJWST briefing, Dr. Tasha Bloom made a statement. The Webb team realized by now that this was more than a far-off thing. It was a dynamic presence that was altering, distorting, and defying the laws of light and motion. However, things were only becoming more bizarre. Because it moved slowly but definitely, even though it didn't behave like anything in our universe. And nobody knew where it was headed next. Unusual motion across space. Beyond its appearance, this object had some of the most peculiar qualities. It was the way it moved. The majority of space objects travel in predictable ways. Planets revolve around stars. Planets are orbited by moons. Even asteroids and comets follow gravity-drawn curves. However, this anomaly did not curve. Instead of falling through space, it moved in a slow, straight line as if it were sliding across it. According to Webb's data, the object moved steadily and deliberately rather than quickly. It did not spin or tumble or loop. Nothing nearby was pulling it, and there were no indications of propulsion. Space doesn't operate that way. Nothing simply drifts aimlessly. According to orbital mechanics expert Dr. Alan Reyes, an object isn't truly moving if it doesn't have thrust or gravity. It's picking a course. The scientific teams were shaken by that. It did not move as though it were trapped in a path, but rather as though it had one. For days Webb kept his eyes fixed on the thing. The object's trajectory stayed steady and straight during that period. It traveled across cosmic microwave background radiation, through gas fields, and behind stars, but it didn't interact with any of them normally. There was no shadow. There was no wake. It did not move in an orbit. Though inertial, it was deliberate. Researchers were unable to locate a source when they traced its course backward. It didn't appear out of nowhere. It had only just started. Its orientation appeared to shift slightly, as if it were reorienting itself, which was even more unnerving. There was no gravitational target in its path. Neither a star nor a black hole was its destination. It was simply floating through nothing at all. Everything around the object displayed evidence of light distortion and ripple effects in space, despite the fact that it was moving without emitting any energy. It was similar to observing a submarine in the sea. A trail through the waves, but no engine noise. Motion without using force. That's when we realized this isn't natural, said Dr. MJO, a data analyst for Webb mission. When something pushes or pulls an object, it moves. However, this one didn't move either. Unaffected by the surrounding cosmos, it forged its own course. Another question arose as astronomers gazed at the motion. What's within this thing? How could something that travels through space as if it knows exactly where it's going be made of what kind of material, energy, or intelligence? A network of shadow and light. Another disturbing detail surfaced as the object was tracked by the James Webb Telescope. Not just its motion, but its surroundings as well. Initially, it seemed to be a pitch-black nothingness. However, a delicate outline started to shimmer around the edges of the infrared images after they were stacked and enhanced. The structure was defined like a web of faint, pulsing threads of light, but it was neither solid nor glowing. It lacked symmetry and a distinct pattern and appeared manufactured, almost planned. This corona's threads weren't acting like dust or anything. Normally, interstellar material would stretch or disperse close to an object, especially one that is moving. Rather, these filaments flickered where they were. Like a heartbeat, they expanded and contracted in gentle rhythmic patterns. The object was not followed by the web-like energy halo. As though anchored to its surface, it remained with it. It was referred to as a skin of light by researchers. It was reacting rather than reflecting, as though space were being folded or wrapped. The refraction patterns in the surrounding starlight were even more concerning. In contrast to starlight near a gravitational mass, starlight passing close to the object did not merely bend. It broke apart, dispersing into asymmetrical spirals. Unlike gravitational lensing found in neutron stars or black holes, these spirals were distinct. They blinked in and out to form asymmetric whirlpools. Webb's instruments were unable to use Einstein's equations to model the behavior of light. The only conclusion was that the object was using geometry itself to manipulate space rather than gravity. Then it became clear that the distortion was caused by more than just the object. Like a lens inside a lens, the object's interior space was also warped. This shell wasn't empty. It was a shell with a warped spaceme cavity inside. It appeared more than just hollow. Aside from whatever physics it was using to distort the universe, it might be functionally empty. Dr. Isaac of the Max Planck Institute stated, "We're looking at a moving shadow, but the light it casts doesn't make sense. It does more than simply absorb light." Regardless of what this object was, it wasn't simply dark. According to Webb team physicist Dr. Helen Yu, it's reprogramming how light behaves. There were layers to it. An impossible edge that bent space in ways that no natural object could, a skin of pulsing light, and a void inside. However, when the Webb started to detect something else, the mystery became even more complex. Something stranger still. It was more than just a moving object. It was making signals. And unlike anything we've ever seen, unusual signals were found. Not long after locking its focus on the straying object, Webb sensors started to exhibit odd behavior. Initially, the tiny oscillations detected by the telescope's fine guidance systems were assumed to be calibration problems. However, following several investigations, the cause was determined to be pulses, subtle but consistent nudges in the spaceme's structural makeup. It was more than a drifting object. It was making waves, but they weren't electromagnetic waves. We comprehended. These pulses were not radio waves. They weren't waves caused by gravity. They were unfamiliar. Like a heartbeat, space-time ripples gently push outward. They were initially detected by Webb's internal gyroscopes, and this was later verified by its high-resolution time series data. There is a pulse every 11.2 seconds, followed by a pause. The pulse's structure changed, but the intensity remained constant. It was more than a beat. It was knowledge. Dr. Eric Abel stated, "We realized we weren't just looking at a moving object. We were hearing it." The team included mathematicians. They made an incredible discovery in a matter of days. Prime number patterns were observed in the intervals between the pulses. Fractal repetition was evident in the echo spikes and decay curves. These weren't merely indicators. They were systems. However, there was only rhythm and math. No message, no Morse code, and no modulation like language. Some believed it to be natural, possibly quantum or geological. Others noticed something different, a system so flawless that it almost seemed purposeful. This was all the more compelling because of what wasn't taking place. There was no heat, no radiation, and no conventional signal that radio telescopes could pick up from the object. Standard instruments couldn't see it. This might have gone unnoticed if it weren't for Webb's infrared accuracy and its capacity to detect positional variations. It wasn't a loud signal. It wasn't yelling for attention. It was just patiently, mathematically, and quietly pulsing. Scientists started posing a straightforward and unsettling question. Does it know? There was no language, no code, no clear message. However, the pulse's steady, accurate, and balanced structure suggested monitoring rather than broadcasting. Maybe a machine listening back. Or worse, a silent observer. According to Dr. Enil Chowdhury of the Web Communications Analysis Group, this does not feel like a beacon. We are the patient, and it has the feel of a stethoscope. Prime numbers are not used for rhythm in nature. Intelligence does. According to Dr. Silvia Reyes, he collaborated. No longer was it merely an odd object traveling through space. The system was now pulsing, reacting, and nearly calculating. But who or what were the signals for, if they meant anything? What did the object become if it was more than natural? What had started out as fringe theory was now becoming mainstream. It could have been constructed. Is it constructed or alive? One conclusion began to emerge as teams from all over the world conducted simulations and web data poured in. This thing was not behaving like a natural product. It wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't deteriorating. Its structure, pulses, and movements seemed too exact. Every response it had to its surroundings seemed precisely calibrated, like an algorithm operating on an invisible program. It was neither spinning nor flying. It seemed to be conscious of its surroundings and was acclimating slowly and gently. This prompted researchers to pose a daring query. Is the thing alive? Not in the sense of a system reacting to stimuli, but rather in the sense of a system without cells, carbon, or metabolism as we know it in biology. The concept of a computational organism is put forth by certain astrobiologists. A system that functions less like a living thing and more like a changing codebase. One that is constructed using information woven into geometry rather than tissue. It doesn't develop. Over millennia, it refines itself to evolve. But and thoughts could all be considered the structure. Then the even more radical thought emerged. What if it was constructed? The mathematical pulses, the fixed location, the precision, and the symmetry all suggested design. It was free of nature's messiness. There were no wear indicators, fragmenting trails, or sporadic energy surges. The item appeared to have undergone optimization. No radiation waste, no drifting debris, and perfect energy balance. Not only was it advanced, but it was impossibly advanced if it were artificial. Such an invention would require millions, if not billions, of years of technological advancement. The most unnatural thing that has ever seen us, or the most natural thing we have never seen. Dr. Felix Umarov is a physicist who studies theory. This object had a purpose if it was created by intelligence or nature. Furthermore, its actions imply that its purpose is still being revealed. Astronomers were now plagued by another question, though, all this time, where had it been? It had not come out of nowhere, nor was it a new arrival. How long has it been observing us? What has it been waiting for? Or worse, for decades? It was hidden. Someone came up with the idea to look backward rather than forward as scientists pored over the new data. Our observations of the cosmos date back decades, but the Webb telescope was new. For years, deep field data has been gathered by Hubble, and even ground-based observatories. Perhaps, just perhaps, this thing had appeared before and nobody had noticed. They discovered something shocking. The thing had always been there, hazy, and lost in the clamor of the cosmos. However, in the old data, the object was always in the same area of the sky and appeared as a faint shadow. It was too quiet to stand out from the background and too dim for earlier instruments to notice. But it suddenly became clear with Webb's accuracy. This indicated that it had not come as a surprise. It hadn't come from far away. For decades, perhaps even longer, it had remained motionless. We hadn't created the means to see it until now. It's not brand new. We are. Dr. Lion Corvus, a data analyst, said the implications of this discovery were chilling. It wasn't orbiting anything if it was really stationary. It wasn't floating. It had been parked in the middle of a cosmic ocean, like a buoy. Was it there all along? Has it noticed us? Or worse, had it waited for us to become sufficiently evolved to notice it? The concept of a threshold object, something intended to stay hidden until a civilization reaches a particular level of technological maturity, was proposed by a few theorists. That switch might have been tripped by Webb. This object has altered our perception of space. regardless of whether it is man-made, natural, or beyond our comprehension. And that's just the start. Please hit subscribe and comment if you find this as fascinating as we do. The universe became much more enigmatic,